Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga, Part 6. In the next 3 verses, there is a description that the soul is supermundane. Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, na chainam kledayantyapo, na shoshayati marutaha. Weapons can't cut the soul, nor can fire burn it. Water cannot drench it, nor can wind make it dry. Weapons can't cut this soul because they are made of earth element which can't even reach the soul. How can they hurt the soul? Fire can't burn the soul because the soul is beyond the reach of fire. It means that fire can never bring any change in the least in it. Water cannot drench the soul because water has no access to it. Water can never bring any change in it. Wind can't dry the soul because it is beyond the reach of wind. It can never bring any change in the least in it. Thus, out of the 5 gross elements, 4 can't hurt the soul. Now the question arises, why has Sri Krishna Paramatma not mentioned the 5th element, ether? The answer is that Akasha is actionless. Earth, water, fire, wind are born of ether and they are incapable of acting on ether, which is inert. Therefore, when they can't even hurt ether, how can they hurt the soul which is beyond the reach of even matter or nature? These elements with attributes can't reach the soul which is without attributes. The soul is eternal. All the 4 elements, such as the earth, etc., are activated by the power of the soul. So, how can they impair the soul, the source of their power? The soul is all pervading, while the 4 elements, such as earth and so on, are the pervaded ones. How can the pervaded ones hurt the all pervading one? Here is a description of the war. Arjuna is grieved at the thought of the imminent death of his kinsman. Therefore, Sri Krishna Paramatma explains to Arjuna that the soul can't be hurt by any of the weapons. A weapon can cut the body, not the soul. A fire-emitting missile can burn the body, but not the soul. The Neptune noose, that is the Varuna weapon, can drench the body, but not the soul. And the wind missile can dry the body, but not the soul. It means that the soul is not hurt by any of the weapons and missiles. It remains the same while it is a body which decays and dies. So it is sheer ignorance to lament for it. Achedyoyam adahyoyam akledyo shoshya eva cha nityas sarvagatastanuhu achaloyam sanatanaha. This soul is uncleavable, incombustible, and neither can be wetted nor dried. It is eternal, all-pervading, stable, constant, and everlasting. In this verse, it is described why weapons and so on can't hurt the soul. This soul is incapable of being cut. Even incantation and curse can't cut the soul, while they can cut the body, as Shakalya was beheaded by Yajnavalkya's curse, because the farmer could not answer the latter's questions. This soul can't be burnt by fire because it is impervious to fire. It can't be burnt even by incantation and curse, as the hunter was burnt to ashes by Damayanti's curse. Only that can be burnt by fire which is prone to fire. The soul is beyond burning. The soul is impervious to water. Water, incantation, curse, and medicines, etc., cannot drench it. As it is said that the tune of Malakosha song wets a stone and the moonlight wets the moon gem. But this soul can't be wetted by any of them. This soul can't be dried by wind, incantation, curse, and medicines, as sage Agastya dried the sea. By using these 2 words, Sri Krishna Paramatma means to say that this soul is beyond the reach of any action. So it should not be grieved for. This soul is eternal. It remains the same all the time. The soul pervades all men, things, and bodies, etc. equally. Achalaha, it is immovable, there is no movement in it. Sthanuhu, it is stable, it does not even shake or vibrate. Sanatana, it is everlasting and beginningless. Something noteworthy. The world is transitory while the soul is eternal. Matter is kaleidoscopic while the soul is stable. All the things and persons and so on of the world are movable while the soul is immovable. And all the worldly objects are subject to birth and decay while the soul is everlasting. Sri Krishna Paramatma means to say that men identify themselves with the bodies and material things, and so they don't realize that they are different from the worldly things, but even then the soul remains uniform and constant all the time. Avyaktoyam achintyoyam avikaryoyam uchyate तस्मादेवं विदित्वैनं नानुशोचितुमर्हसि. This soul is unmanifest, unthinkable, and immutable. Therefore, knowing it as such, you should not grieve. Avyaktoyam, the soul, unlike the body, is unmanifest because it can't be perceived by any of the senses. Achintyoyam, mind and intellect can't be perceived by senses, but they are thinkable. But the soul is unthinkable. Avikaryoyam uchyate, this soul is immutable, that is, it does not undergo any change while matter is changing all the time. The cause of the entire creation is matter. That causative nature, that is matter, is subject to change. The soul is beyond any change as it is transcendental. In the 24th and 25th verses, Sri Krishna Paramatma has described the soul by giving 8 adjectives of negation and 4 adjectives of affirmation. But the fact is that it can't be described in words, because how can tongue illumine the soul which is the illuminator of the tongue? Therefore, this realization about the soul self is its real description. Thus, by realizing this soul as uncleavable, incombustible, unmanifest, everlasting, and immutable, one cannot grieve. Now, in the next 2 verses, Sri Krishna Paramatma says that even if one thinks of the soul as changeable, which is against the principle, one should not grieve. Atachainam nityajatam nityam va manyase mritam tatapi tvam mahabaho naivam shochitumarhasi. O mighty armed, even if you regard the soul as constantly undergoing birth and death, even then you should not grieve. Sri Krishna Paramatma here, by giving the terms such as Ata Cha and Manyase, means to say that it is a fact that the soul is unborn. Yet, even if you accept the contrary, you should not grieve, because one who is born is bound to die, and one who dies is bound to be reborn. None can escape this eternal principle. A seed sown in the earth assumes different shapes, sprout, plant, tree, and then it dries up and decays. The fact is that the seed undergoes change every moment. If this seed had remained the same even for a moment, how had it passed different stages up to the last stage of its drying up as a tree? It gave up its prior form, it is its death, and it assumes a new shape, it is its birth. Thus, it passes through birth and death every moment. Similarly, this body also undergoes a change every moment. Sperm gets mixed up with ovum and the mixture grows into a baby which is born. With its birth, the process of death sets in, which culminates in death. Thus, this body undergoes a continuous change, that is, it is born, it decays, and dies. Therefore, Sri Krishna Paramatma says to Arjuna that if he holds this view that the soul undergoes birth and death like the body, there is no ground for grieving. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuhu dhruvam janma mritasya cha tasmadapariharyerte natvam shochitumarhasi. Death is certain of him who is born, and rebirth is certain of him who is dead. You should not, therefore, grieve over the inevitable. According to the previous verse, if the soul is regarded as constantly taking birth and constantly dying, one should not grieve because death is certain of him who is born and rebirth is certain of him who is dead. This cycle of birth and death has been going on from time immemorial and will continue into eternity. Therefore, you should not lament over the inevitable. These Dhritarashtra's sons and Bhishma, Drona and so on who are born will surely die. You can't save them, and after death they will certainly take birth. You cannot check it. So why should you grieve? As the sun has risen, it will certainly set, and if it is set, it will definitely rise. This is an inevitable fact which is known to all. Therefore, none grieves over the setting of the sun. It implies that one should not grieve over the death of anybody. Whatever Sri Krishna Paramatma has stated in these two verses is not true in principle. By the expression Atacha, the Lord has put forth the argument of the people who identify themselves with the body. This is not the correct principle. In no case Arjuna should grieve. To bring home this point to him, Sri Krishna Paramatma has explained from this angle also. In these two verses, Sri Krishna Paramatma means to say that all the worldly things, including the bodies, undergo change from one form to another. Abandoning the first form is called death, and change to the second form is called birth. One should not grieve over this cycle because it goes on. In the next verse, Sri Krishna Paramatma mentions the simple law of nature about birth and death. Avyaktadini bhutani vyaktam madhyani bharata avyakta nidananyeva tatra ka paridevana. O Bharata, all beings were unmanifest before they were born and will become unmanifest again when they are dead. They are manifest only in the intermediate stage. What is the point then for lamentation? Avyaktadini bhutani. All the beings perceived now were not perceived before birth. These beings will not be perceived after death. All these beings are manifest in the interim, that is, after birth and before death. Their bodies were non-existent before birth and will remain non-existent after death, just like a dream. During life, they seem to exist because actually they are going into non-existence every moment. It is a principle that the thing which has no origin and end has no existence in its mid-state. Therefore, these bodies which were unmanifest in their origin and will be unmanifest in their end are unmanifest even now, though they seem manifest. But the soul existed in the past, exists now, and will also exist in future. So there is no point in lamenting for them.